Hello, Alan. How are you?
Hello, Nirmal. It's good. At least there's a bit of sunshine out there today between the rain showers. And just thank you for the opportunity to come on your podcast and share my story.
It's a pleasure to have you, and it's a pleasure for our listeners also to get to know you and understand all the things that go behind the Greyhound racing in WA and maybe across Australia. One of my friends told me about your organization, and I was looking at adopting a dog. So I went to one of the dog adoption agencies, and that's where they told me about your agency. So I was very interested in knowing about you and your organization. And thank you for giving your time today.
No, that's fine. Any opportunity to explain what we do and why we do is very much appreciated, and getting out to different audiences across social media and wherever we can.
So let's start from start. Tell us about your Free the Hounds organization. What do you do in WA and maybe across Australia for the Greyhounds?
Yeah, okay. So, Free the Hounds, we are an advocacy group, a welfare advocate group, and we started in 2015. So, we've just celebrated our 10th anniversary. We started off as a very small, loose Facebook group, and of probably a dozen people who have adopted greyhounds, and we all start to realise these dogs had some major issues. My first rescue, he was blind in one eye from head trauma during a race, and my current rescue I've got now, she actually broke her leg racing. So that's why I became passionate. I started as a volunteer. We are a 100% volunteer organisation. We are a registered not-for-profit. And basically, our mission now is to improve welfare in racing with the ultimate aim of phasing it out. It's just been announced in Tasmania. They are defunding racing in Tasmania with a possible 3-year phase out, and it was announced last year in New Zealand that they are banning greyhound racing. So it's losing its social license. It's cruel, it's inhumane, it's outdated and unsustainable. So basically, that's what we do. We lobby government to make these changes. With greyhound racing, it is run state by state in Australia. So really, we can only sort of lobby Western Australia government to stop it here in Western Australia. We have got a lot of support in Parliament, but we just can't break the line that they will announce for it to be finished here in WA. So I think basically that's who Free the Hounds are. Like I said, I've been doing it now for 8 years. Started just as a general volunteer, helping out at markets and things, and somehow now I've ended up as vice president of the organisation.
Good, good. So let's see how I see it. So when I see about any greyhound racing or even a horse racing or any other racing, I just see a race, a few dogs running around a lap or a few laps, and then people putting bets on it. What what does actually goes behind that race? Give us a view of what all things go around that race, so we can understand what are the issues around what you are advocating for.
If you take a typical greyhound race, there's a very, very good chance that a dog is going to be severely injured. Usually that means a broken bone, usually a broken leg. There are other minor injuries. If you look at how it works, this racing has 7 categories of injuries and that is based on a vet's assessment on the night of the race. So the vet might say, "Oh, it's hurt its toe, so we'll stand it down for 14 days," which means it can't race for 14 days. but then on further assessment, maybe the next day or 2 days later, it's a worse injury because the on-track vet has no diagnostic equipment. It's just a quick look. But that's always then listed as a minor injury, even if the dog can't race for another 6 months. Well, and so racing in itself, it's just inherently dangerous for dogs. It's called an industry, but it's not really an industry, it's a sport. And they have done their own research into why are so many injuries occurring. In WA, Greyhound Racing is run directly by the state government, which is unique in Australia. None of the others are run by state governments, but here it is a state government organisation. So basically it's taxpayer-funded cruelty that they're putting these dogs at risk whenever they race. If you look at the money that goes into racing, like the 3 tracks in WA is Cannington, Mandurah and Northam. And 2 years ago, they spent $8 million on Mandurah track to upgrade it to a safe track. Last year, they spent $3 million on Cannington to make it a safe track, but nothing has changed in regard to the numbers of deaths and injuries. So all up over the 3 tracks, you're looking at $13 million been invested, and this is taxpayers' money. And they claim this is their big welfare initiatives, the money they're spending on upgrading the tracks, but it's just not working. Deaths and injuries over, say, the last 8 years that Racing and Wagering have reported the injuries in their annual report, nothing has changed. And the injury side of things, it's sort of very hard to explain how they do it. But in WA, in a typical year, you've got 1,660 registered race dogs. In a typical year, between 700 and 800 injuries. And the racing industry, they claim that as 0.2% injury rate, where to me, we say 43% because some dogs can get injured 2 or 3 times. And the racing underplay the injury numbers in the way they work out their injury rates. So it's the industry is, and the economic report has been sort of looked at by different state treasuries, top economists, and they say it's not right. What they're saying in their economic report isn't correct, and this is because they, I'd say, misrepresent figures. So no, but in a typical race, like a dog races once a week, and for a race is around 25, 30 seconds, that's the dog's life. Under the rules of racing, they can be kennelled for 23 hours a day, come out for 15 minutes exercise, whatever, and that's it. We don't believe that is the life for a dog. We're in 2025. It's outdated. We shouldn't be using animals for gambling, and we definitely shouldn't be using them in a sport with such a massive injury and death rate.
So thank you for giving that overview of what goes in the industry. You said that in WA, the racing is conducted by the government itself, which means they would be much more compliant with the regulations and requirements and the welfare of the dogs itself. Is it the case compared to other states, or is it the same injury percentages across the Australian states?
No, things are pretty much the same across Australia. Here, the racing itself is managed by Racing and Wagering WA, but Racing and Wagering WA sits under the state government as an agency, Greyhounds WA, who are responsible for managing the tracks themselves, they sit under the WA government. So, and that's where there's the issue, because racing and wagering, they're the ones that sort of run the racing, they run the wagering side of things, and then they also run the welfare and investigation side of things. So there's no independent oversight of racing. It's all kept within Racing and Wagering WA.
So when the government itself does the overall compliance and regulation, but also runs the races, is there a conflict of interest, or is it just the way how things are to be done?
It's just the way it's done here. Like I said, if you look at the structure the, of Racing and Wagering, you've got the main people, but the top of the list is the Minister for Racing and Wagering, and he's responsible. Like I said, the compliance and welfare and everything that becomes under Racing and Wagering WA. So really the state government, the state government, they own the TAB as well. So the state government own the gambling side of things. Racing and Wagering, they manage it, for want of a better word. So Racing and Wagering WA, they manage the racing, but ultimately it is the responsibility of the Minister for Racing and Wagering.
How do you see the data on injuries being reported by the government to which is you might have seen otherwise? That is there a lack of reporting, or are they reporting every injury what happens on the ground?
Yeah, with the injuries, what Racing and Wagering do, like I said, in a typical year, you've got around 1,600 dogs. But what Racing and Wagering do, they measure injuries against what they call starters. And that is every dog in every race over a year. And it comes to 30,000 starters. So what they report, well, we had 800 injuries in 30,000 starters. Where we say, no, you had 800 injuries with 1,600 dogs. Because and that's what we get. If we email a member of parliament, that's what we get back. Injuries are insignificant, but if you class it against individual dogs, we say 43% of dogs are injured, which is it's not insignificant. It is a highly significant number of dogs. If you worked in a business and your employees had a 43% injury rate, I don't think you'd be in business for very long. That's half your staff getting injured. You wouldn't be in business long.
You said the government also runs the betting industry in WA, which brings a lot of money. There's a lot of people who are involved in the tab agencies, the betting agencies, the running the races itself, the veterinarians. So many people are involved. So many jobs are involved in this racing. So how do you balance the interest of those jobs and economy versus a few injuries to the dogs?
Yeah. In reality, the majority of like the gambling income goes directly back into racing. The state government, all the state government gets from it is a small percentage of what they call a point of consumption tax. So where bets are made, they pay a bit of tax, and the state government only get a small percentage of that. Everything else goes back into racing. The Office of the Auditor General, because that's another statistic that we get back from the ministers within Parliament, is there's 1,700 full-time equivalent employees. But just recently, the Office of the Auditor General which is a state government agency, they did a report into racing, and they could only find 191 people employed in racing, and only 31 of them were permanent employees. Racing can't break down where that 1,700 figure comes from. But in their economic report, and it's even stated in their economic report, is what happens is they duplicate people. So if you breed a dog, you train that dog, you own that dog, you in 2 syndicates, they count that as 5 employees, where it can be one person doing all 5 of them. So there is a lot of duplication, but we do a lot of freedom of information questions to racing and wagering, and they can't break that 1,700 figure down. So, but according to the Australian Bureau of Statistics, there's not that many people employed. And with me and I'm well retired now, but in my previous employment, we went through 4 restructures, which brought in redundancies. It's pretty much a fact of life now. And with the people in Greyhounds WA, they are state government employees, so they can be redeployed. You know, the state government would have a redundancy package for these people. We presented a petition to Parliament last year, and we ended up with 27,000 signatures on that petition. And what we're calling for is a 3-year phase out. So that gives the opportunity to rehome the dogs and retrain people. And the funding that's going to the TAB at the moment, and I believe that's how they're doing it in New Zealand, is that is what will fund retraining people. You know, it's like anybody. If you become redundant, you have to go and find another job. Not many companies would say, "Oh well, we'll find a job for you. We'll give you all this money and everything." So, no, it's an unfortunate fact of life that there will be a few people. 90% of the participants in Greyhound Racing claim it as a hobby, so it's not their main source of income, and plus they don't have to pay tax then on any winnings or bonuses they get from racing. So it's difficult once you start to really look into racing. There's just that many sort of left curves and right curves, and it does get very detailed. It's hard to explain in a short time.
So, when you did that petition to the government, what happened afterwards? Was there any parliamentary inquiry or a report? And if yes, what is the government doing anything on that report?
The committee that looks into the petition, they haven't met yet. So, as far as I know, they haven't met yet because it was submitted at the end of Parliament last year, and then we had the re-election, so it got resubmitted again at the start of Parliament this year, and the committee that forms to look into that hasn't met. But we did do 2 previous petitions, which they said, "Oh no, we can't be bothered looking." But what did happen last year, the Budget Estimates Committee held a hearing into racing. And that meant Racing and Wagering went and gave their evidence, Greyhounds WA gave their evidence, and we went and presented our evidence to this parliamentary committee. And the recommendation from that was to have a full inquiry this year. But with the election, it sort of held things up a bit and forming new committees. So that is now what our main mission is to push the state government to commit to a full inquiry. WA is the only state that hasn't held an inquiry into greyhound racing. So that's our main aim at the moment. We're meeting as many members of parliament as we can to put our case across and just get a general feel. But hopefully, we've still got a couple of months left this year, so hopefully this inquiry will take place this year, because really we're at a standstill where we go now. And once this inquiry is held and we get a response from the inquiry, that can then guide where Free the Hounds start to target and see what we can do. It might be just forming committees to really improve welfare or something like that, but it depends on this parliamentary committee when they decide to hold, or if they decide to hold a full inquiry. So hopefully it does happen, and hopefully it happens before the end of the year.
You shared that Tasmania also, okay, Tasmania already had an election recently, and they've already decided to phase out Greyhound Racing. WA also had an election recently. What's preventing WA to go the Tasmania way of deciding, make a decision, and then move on to it instead of these reports and then another report and then another report and another inquiry? What's the difference?
Very, very good question. We wish we knew. We don't know why the state government can't just get up and say, yes, we believe that greyhound racing is outdated, it's lost social. There's no reason they can't, but they just don't want to. And that's why we're talking with members of parliament now. We're trying to understand what it is that the state government want to continue with greyhound racing. And they've got all the facts and figures. We've given them so much information. We keep a massive database. We monitor every race, every dog. We track a dog's history, and we provide that to members of parliament, but we just can't get across the line. And that's where we're hoping this inquiry will then guide us on what we really need to do to get greyhound racing finished.
So, while the government is looking at another report, is there any particular action that you want to do in the intervening period while they are doing their inquiry and come out with a report and make a decision? Is there something you want to do them today?
No, we just encourage our followers to keep emailing their local member of parliament to, if they can, have face-to-face meetings. We're finding now that having a face-to-face meeting with your local member is more advantageous than sending emails. When you send the email, they will just send back a generic formatted response, and that's why we've pulled it apart that much, because that generic response is the one with 1,700 employees. We've got a gold standard of animal welfare. They had a meeting in 2017, which brought in a lot of changes, which it was one meeting. And so the state government is resting its head on a meeting held 8 years ago to be the gold standard. And like I said, they pumped a lot of money into upgrading tracks as one of their welfare initiatives, which isn't working. So I just don't know what else we can do. And like I said, we'll just have to wait on the outcomes of the inquiry to guide us where we go at the moment. But at the moment, we're just talking as much as we can with like all parties, not just the Labor Party, Liberal members. We finally got an animal justice party in the upper house now, so that's another voice for the animals. The Greens are very much on side, but it's just the Premier and the Racing Minister have to make that final decision.
There was a big push towards banning the betting ads on media, social media, TV, whatever. That took a lot of traction, but it doesn't connect to the racing itself. So they want the ban on ads, but not the racing. Why is there that difference or a disconnect between racing and betting?
Yeah, it's not really a disconnect because racing purely exists for gambling. Like, remember, when you look at attendance figures at Greyhound Racing, like at the hearing last year, like in their economic report, they say 60,000 people a year attend Greyhound Racing. And when they were asked by a minister at the hearing, how do you get that figure? Because it's free to go in. There's nobody at the gate collecting money or taking attendance numbers. How do you work that out? And the response from Greyhounds WA, oh, well, we base it on how many meals we sell at our restaurant. But when we did a freedom of information over the last 5 years, I think it was, it averaged 30,000 meals. So we sort of said, well, where do you get 60,000 people? If you based it on the meals you sell, you're selling 30,000 meals. And like I said, that's where they tend to manipulate figures to make the sport much, much bigger than what it is. Like I've been to the track a few times now, and you stand out like a sore thumb because everybody else is in their syndicate uniforms or and stuff like that. And there's not that many members of the public now who go to racing. Most of the gambling now is online, so you don't have to go to the track to bet. People do it, and when you do it online, like with Ladbroke, Sportsbet, and these big gambling agencies, most of the profits from that is going overseas. It's not even staying in Australia. So racing basically survived for gambling, and that's all it's about.
So when you do your advocacy, do you work with other racings like horse racing as well, or is it just you're looking at greyhound racing? Because that's animal abuse as well, if we consider the same parameters.
Yep. Free the Hounds, we just concentrate on greyhound racing. Like most of our volunteers, they also support like the Coalition for Protection of Racehorses, but like we're sort of realistic. The thoroughbreds is very big. There's a lot of money in there. You've got the royal family. Like you look at the royal family and all these people. They're all sort of fully into thoroughbred racing. But in WA, you've got your harness racing, which too it's similar to greyhound racing. It's not getting the crowds it was getting, say, 20 years ago. It's just the public attitudes have changed, and the government needs to keep up with the public attitude. When you look, how many circuses do you go to now that have elephants, lions, tigers, bears? None, because it was recognised that the public didn't want that. It was cruel. But they don't sort of attune that to abuse of dogs and horses. But like I said, as Free the Hounds, we don't sort of get into the thoroughbred side of things because we just need to concentrate. We get a lot of criticism because we do mainly only focus on the greyhound, but that is our purpose. But like we do also support other welfare advocacy groups, and we don't see ourselves as activists.
Uh, we talked about the racing and the government's participation or the industry participation. Tell us about the injuries to the dogs. So when they get injured, What happens to them? Are they all euthanized, or they are left with the owners? What happens?
Yeah, okay. So depending on, and like I said, this is a in the moment vet assessment with no, they haven't got X-rays or anything like that at the track. They've just got their bag of little instruments. So the initial on-track assessment, typically a vet can say if it's a really catastrophic break or injury, they can be euthanized on the track. I think so far this year shows like there's been 12 dogs euthanized directly on the track, and there's been 55 major injuries, which is typically broken legs. But, and like I said, in the annual report, that's how they list injury severity, is on that initial inspection. But what we've noticed lately is there's a lot of dogs getting, like, they get a broken leg in a race, they're then gave back to their trainer to take to a vet, and then the next day they're listed as dead. So we are of the thinking that this is happening because then in the annual report it's really reducing the number of on-track deaths, and they just then get listed in the annual report as a 90-day stand down, not as an on-track death. So once again, it's that manipulation of figures that sort of upset things. But and like I said, you can get, a dog might seem to have a slight injury and it gets a 14-day stand down. But our research and we tracking the dog, some we finding might not come back to racing for 3-4 months, 6 months. So has that injury on further veterinary inspection, is it worse than what was initially thought on the night that the dog got injured? So, like I said, there's no clarity around that in reporting, and you just don't get that information.
So, like, if I'm breeding for a dog which can run the fastest and get to the finish line first, I'll be breeding like 5, 10, 20 pups all at the same time, where I might get one winner. What happens to the other 18, 19 pups?
No, well, that's a very good question that we can't get an answer to. Like, out of a typical litter of, say, 6 dogs, even if 4 go into racing, we don't know what happens with the other 2 because, like, with rehoming, normally you're looking at the youngest that come into rehoming might be 16 months old, because at that age, a trainer will know definitely whether or not they're going to make a racing dog or not. So we're not sure what happens with them dogs, but and there's no record kept of them dogs. So it's a very good question. It is commonly referred to in advocacy and activist groups as wastage, that they overbreed the dog, because that's another issue we get, because the breeders get paid a bonus if their dog wins a race in certain classes of races. Depends how much that breeder gets a bonus for breeding that dog. So that also creates the issue where breeders are breeding more and more dogs to get more and more dogs into racing. And because they only look at like body mass and that, they're not, one of the common killers of greyhounds lately is osteosarcoma, bone cancer. But because racing don't look into that, because they're only looking at breeding a dog with muscle mass and speed and stuff like that. So the breeding side too becomes a big issue. And like I said, every year 600 dogs come into rehoming, and that's where we consider unsustainable, because like Shenton Park's dogs home. They're overflowing with abandoned dogs. RSPCA get criticised because they euthanise dogs, which they don't do that as much. But they can't rehome their dogs because the greyhound industry, the state government, is pumping out 600 dogs a year into rehoming. So the breeding side is an issue. And like I said, what happens to the ones that don't make it into racing? We don't know.
Uh, with the adoption of these greyhounds, are they easily adapting to the new environment, or they just suffer from PTSD from all the stress and the whatever training they have to go through to race? Is it a lifeline issue?
Yeah. The majority of the dogs, they seem to readapt, and it from being handed over to a rehome. Like I also volunteer with a volunteer rehoming group here, and you can find within 6 weeks these dogs have completely changed. But in saying that, you do still get a lot of dogs that do have sort of psychological issues, you could call them. They're a lot of them, for some reason, are really scared of men, and they're socialised because when they're racing, and if they're racing for 4 years, they're not socialised with other dogs, and so once they come out of racing, it's a whole new environment. But when I take my rescue for a walk, like it could take 2 hours to do a lap of an oval because she wants to sniff and smell everything. Everything for a long time is new to them. They're not used to that environment. But in most cases, they become these beautiful, affectionate, well, they call them couch potatoes because they just want to lie on the lounge all day. But like I said, and we are getting some into the rehoming program with really in really bad condition, like usually they're dental because the food they eat, and when they're locked up in a kennel all day, they chew on the bars or on the wood in the kennel, so they have a lot of dental issues. One recently where it had broken its leg and it had pins and plates in there that had become infected, and it's all a massive financial cost to a volunteer rehoming group. So but mostly that they take when I picked up my recent one, I had chickens out the backyard, and from day one she just wasn't interested in them. So they go from this prey drive to chase a lure around the track to just wanting to lay around and just be a normal dog. But no, they're a beautiful pet, and that's why we are so passionate about that. That's what they should be bred for. Breed them as pets, not to become a gambling commodity.
Right. So you talked about asking people to reach up to their member of parliament and advocating for these greyhounds. Is there anything else that people can do or the listeners can do to help the ending of the commercial greyhound racing?
No, not really. The only advice you can give is not to gamble on the animals. If you want to gamble, gamble on the football, gamble on the soccer, gamble on a human sport or something else. Do not gamble on animals. And just look into, like, go to the Free the Hounds website. It's just freethehounds.com.au, and look at the information on there. Research, like look on, although you don't get any negative information on racing websites, but and then make your mind up. If you're against racing, talk to your family, talk to your work friends, and just get the point across that it is a cruel, outdated sport.
Oh, Alan, you talked about your website just now. Uh, are you present or are you using other social media or media platforms to get your message across?
Yep. We're on most social media platforms now. Facebook, like I said, the website. We do a podcast, which we actually call Talking Couch Potatoes, which you can access from our website, or it's on Spotify. I think we're sort of digging into doing a bit of YouTube stuff now. Not so much TikTok, but mainly Instagram and Facebook and our website.
That's good. 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 So, assume the Greyhound Racing stops today. What's the next step for your organization after that? Like, you've achieved your goal now.
Yeah, enjoy my retirement that I was supposed to start 6 years ago, which I haven't. No, but if it stopped today, you're going to have like 1,600 dogs that need rehoming. So we then work with rehoming groups. Whether or not we'd have to form our own rehoming group, but the Racing and Wagering have got their rehoming group, Greyhound as Pets. There's the main volunteer group, Greyhound Adoptions WA, and they're rehoming 600, 700 dogs a year now. So to rehome 1,600 dogs or whatever over 3 years, there'll be a major issue, and that's the criticism we get is, if you stop it today, these trainers are going to kill their dogs. And you go, well, wait a minute, you're telling us that they love their dogs, and now you're saying they're going to kill them because they're no good to them. So, no, and like I said, it'd rely on the state government on if they announce a phase out, it will be the government sort of getting involved with us and sort of working out how it is going to work. We sort of give them a lot of information how we believe it can work, but ultimately it'd be up to the state government to provide a lot of the funding for it and a lot of the guidance on how it is going to happen.
Good. Before closing, is there anything else that you'd like to share about your work, about Greyhound Racing itself, or in general about Greyhound Racing in Australia, not just WA?
Yeah, the only other real issue we see with racing as well is like we said, it's you're getting dogs severely injured at a racetrack, you're getting dogs killed at the racetrack. Racing and Wagering, they promote greyhound racing as family entertainment. They have kids' playground. They encourage you to bring your kids to watch this. But if there's a catastrophic injury, they delete their replays off their adult accessed websites because it's too traumatic. So, and like we said, the racing is all about gambling. There's a lot of alcohol at the racetrack, and we don't believe it is family entertainment. I definitely wouldn't take my kids to watch animal cruelty, and so that's a major issue in the Greyhound WA Greyhounds annual report. There's so many photos of kids at the track watching these dogs, and you think it's just not right because when they get injured, they let out a huge scream. We call it the Greyhound scream of death, and it must be traumatizing for children to be there watching this. Either that or it desensitizes children to animal cruelty. So we believe that if racing is to continue, it's an 18 plus event. No kids go there. You can't take your kids to the casino.
Sure. Thank you, Alan. And before let me go, how can people reach out to you, maybe to know more about your work or maybe join you in your volunteering work?
Yeah, like I said, if they access our website, there's plenty of information on there. There'll be a link on there to our mail out. So if there is like a major incident or something, we can send out that information and we can get you in contact with all your members of parliament. If you're really interested in meeting greyhounds, we have got a big, what they call the Global Greyhound Walk coming up. It'll be the last weekend in September on a Sunday. But last year we had 343 greyhounds there, and it's just an event that's held across the globe for rescued greyhounds. You take your dogs. It'll be held at Piney Lakes it's off Murdoch Drive, South Street. And it's just a good place. But the adoption agency, they attend markets. So if they look up Greyhound Adoptions WA, you can go and meet and greet. They have a lot of information there. But like I said, our main information is through our website, freethehounds.com.au.
Sure, sure. I'll put the link in next to our podcast as well so that people can reach out to it. And best of luck in your work. You're doing a good job and hope you get success more in your effort. Thank you for doing this, Alan, and giving us your time.
No, thank you for having me on your podcast. Like I said, it's just a great opportunity to get the word out there and get as much support as we can. And like when we talk to people, like 99% of the people don't even know that greyhound racing is still a thing. So it's not that big a shift in people's mentality that we have to get through to. So I've given the state government at maximum a year and a half because I turned 70 then, and I said I want to get into my retirement. So hopefully we're getting there. We've had big moves in the last year or so we're definitely making big waves.
Good, good. Thank you, Alan.